You're listening to Barbell Logic,
the podcast where we talk about what it means to experience strength
and how you can use simple, hard, and effective strategies in training and nutrition to improve your life.
It starts with meeting you where you are right now and finding lasting solutions.
Welcome to the show.
Hello, and welcome to the Barbell Logic podcast. Good to see you. I'm joined today by Andrew Jackson. Andrew is our Andrew's our Chief Operations Officer, an exclusive coach, and a nutrition coach here at Barbell Logic. And I'm your host, Nikki Sims. I am the Chief Experience Officer, an exclusive coach, and also a nutrition coach. We were just practicing our White Lotus opening sequence song for you, but we're going to hold off on it today because it's just not 100% ready yet, but we've been working on though. So yeah, we'll keep working on it for
you. That's pretty good. It's getting there.
Anyway,
I'm a little bit more of I'm a fan of using the tongue for it. I think it gets you a little closer.
I think it's going to be a good collab. So Andrew, thanks for being here today. We are going to talk about something that I honestly kind of never thought we'd be talking about on the Barbell Logic podcast. We're going to talk about walking.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're going to tell you why in just a minute. But before we do that, let's talk about, we have 2 BL1K awards. These are our lifters who have just hit, or very recently hit, their 1,000th workout, which is pretty bomb. That takes a long time to do. Yeah, so rad. So the first one I want to tell you about is James Moss. James is coached by Brooke Habenstricker for strength and Brittany Snyder for nutrition. She's also the director of nutrition here at Barbell Logic. But this is what Brooke wanted to share about James. She says, I have not met many lifters that have as strong of mental fortitude as James. He never complains, he rarely misses training sessions, and he does his best to continue pushing himself. Even when he's navigating life with newborn twins, stubborn injuries, discouraging setbacks, or whatever obstacles are thrown his way, he's become an exceptional lifter and has hit many lofty volume PRs along the way, which are his favorite. That's nice. Makes me actually want to meet James. And Brittany says, Brooke has said it really well. I'm always impressed by his consistency and his ability to overcome. He puts in the work to balance life demands while also prioritizing his own wellness. Super proud of this hardworking family man. That's really rad. Congratulations, James. And congratulations, Brooke and Brittany, for helping him get there. The BL1K we were excited to implement because it acknowledges the consistency, and it takes a lot of consistency. No matter what life kind of throws at you, you learn how to adapt, but we just wanted to acknowledge how people just keep showing up. And the second client is actually mine. I'm pretty excited about this. It's Marty Curran. Marty, he has a full-time job, and then he also runs a gym, which is pretty rad. He does both a lot. Wow. He does both of them to a really high level. He has been with us since what I call the dawn of time, which is when it was just Matt running Reynolds Strong. He even wears his Reynolds Strong shirt when he's lifting sometimes. So it's been a really, really long time.
That's like prehistory, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, actually. It's a Big Bang Theory. But he's done really well. He's really strong. He always kind of surprises me. I think as a coach, as a long time I've been doing this, I'm still surprised by when I'm programming. I'm like, well, I think this is what's going to happen when I program. And then he'll go compete and pull like 200 pounds more at his competition than we did in training.
I think I saw that video.
Yeah, it was like a 600 pound
completely
deadlift.
Crushed his 600 pound deadlift. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have these moments, full transparency, where I'm like, I don't know how I had anything to do with that, but what I think contributes to it is that Marty will show up and get the work done, but he's also thinks about it a lot because he coaches. So I can trust him to have some really valuable insight. He's also worked through a lot of shoulder issues. He's had shoulder surgery, and his bench is continuing to do really, really well. So yeah, really love working with Marty. He's fun. He's got the right amount of snark, which is really keeps my job entertaining as well. So thank you, Marty. Keep it coming. Excellent. So moving on into walking, why do you think it's important for us to be talking about this?
Well, first off, going back to your original point of surprise that we're talking about walking, I want to give a little background on myself from athletics performance and what I used to consider conditioning. Growing up playing soccer, basketball, baseball, and then into college, I was a competitive rower and I wrestled in high school. So lots and lots and lots of conditioning, endurance sports, high intensity sports, and things where performance in those sports was largely dependent on how in shape you were. So after school, I also was really big into running and cycling relatively long distances. I would do 100-mile bike rides. I've ridden up and down the Oregon coast on my bike. Used to run to work, like strap a backpack on or go run 12 miles. I never got into the marathon thing, but conditioning for me was always something on the order of either long and slow, or then after 10 years of doing that endurance kind of recreational sport, I got into CrossFit. So a lot of high intensity interval kind of stuff. And walking, I never really categorized as conditioning. I just thought, well, you walk. There was a period of time where I would kind of pay attention to how often I was standing. I walked a fair amount going around the factories that I would work at, but never really intentionally thought about how much I would walk until the first time I ever really intentionally, I would go backpacking and hiking. I guess some people call that rucking now. But the first time I ever really intentionally tried to walk was probably during COVID, just because the lockdowns, we were so inactive. Yeah. And I was working with Jillian as my nutrition coach at the time, and would go out, try to get outside at least once a day and go for a walk just to get out of the house. But it was about a year ago, actually last April, when I came across a study titled Daily Step Count and All-Cause Mortality, a Dose Response Meta-Analysis of Prospective Cohort Studies, which
that
actually
sounds
came
like
out.
Something you would be interested way more than why walking is great for you. 5 reasons to keep stepping.
Yeah. I think the 10,000 step thing has been around for a long time. I remember Fitbits really popping up kind of in early 2000s, and people were paying attention to and talking about trying to get more steps. It's been around for a long time. And particularly that kind of 10,000 number, for whatever reason, I think that dates back into the 90s, that some kind of early studies had come out showing that was a good number to aim at. But, so steps have been something that's peripherally on my mind. But when I saw the results from this study, it caught my attention in a different way, because first off, it was a very extensive study. It was over 175,000 person years of data. It was a prospective cohort study of meta-analysis, 7 different prospective cohort studies, meaning that prospective versus retrospective is that a prospective study says, hey, we have this hypothesis, let's go get a bunch of people together and then monitor them over time and see what happens with respect to that hypothesis, versus a retrospective where we look at a population and their outcomes and then try to backtrack into whatever the hypothesis is prior to those outcomes. So there's typically a little bit more validity put on prospective studies because you're able to capture the data a little bit more accurately. And in this case, also, the data was being collected by step counters, which have been ubiquitous for the last 10, 15 years. So the quality of the data was really good, and the sample size was really good. And then most importantly, I would say the results were what caught my attention, in that the effect was very well documented, not just in saying this study says at 10,000 steps, blah, 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 blah. What it showed was that there was a linear relationship from 2,700 steps all the way to 17,000 steps a day.
Oh, wow.
A linear reduction in hazard ratio, or improvement in hazard ratio, which is a comparison of the hazard rate of the 2 different populations that they were tracking, basically the control versus the population that was having the increased steps. So essentially like no activity versus the step group. So linear improvement in hazard ratio from 2,700 to 17,000 means that it's not just like you hit 10,000 and you achieve some result. It's essentially showing that every step you take essentially is an incremental improvement in the outcome.
Wow, that's cool.
And So it was the therapeutic window, I guess we would use as terminology, to show that you had this wide range of results. And then it was also the intensity of the impact that stood out to me in the study. So specifically, it measured in terms of that linear relationship. For every 1,000 steps, there was a 0.88 improvement in hazard ratio for the overall analysis. And that by the time you get to that 10,000 step number, your hazard ratio was at 0.44. So what does that mean? How do I translate that into something useful to use? 0.44, that doesn't mean I have a 44% reduction in my risk of all-cause mortality. That hazard ratio is comparing the control to the study group. And so there's been different people that have tried to come up with ways to try to communicate this to the public. And the best one that I could find was sort of change in effective age. And that 0.44 correlates to a change in effective age of 8 years. So
Oh, wow.
the formula is actually pretty simple that they came up with. It's basically 10 times the natural log of the hazard ratio. So you take 10 times the natural log of 0.44 and you get -8, meaning that your change in effective age relative to your hazard rate is -8 years or 8 years less. So by walking 10,000 steps a day, I have reduced my effective age in terms of hazard rate by 8 years. Somebody 8 years younger than me has roughly the same hazard rate that I do in terms of all-cause mortality, which interestingly is almost exactly the same impact in the opposite direction as smoking a pack a day of cigarettes.
Oh, wow.
So put this into context. How much weight do we put in terms of the value of quality of life and health improvement behind stopping smoking? How much do we talk about how we shouldn't smoke and how we need to stop smoke? I mean, this has been something we've talked about basically for all of yours and my lifetime, and continues to be a huge impact in mortality across the globe. This paper came out saying that 10,000 steps was the same improvement in your hazard rate as stopping smoking a pack a day.
That's amazing. I had not heard it summed up that way. That is a big impact.
Yeah. So smoking a pack a day adds 8 years to your effective age. Walking 10,000 steps reduces. So that's why I just kind of want to. Yeah.
So if you do want to start smoking, make sure you also start walking 10,000 steps a day. And then you're just at zero.
When you look at the change of effective age research or the information, the guy that wrote the study, he has a clause in there that specifically says a lot of people are going to be tempted to go out and find all their hazard ratios and try to like stack them up to either reduce my effective age to like 20 or cancel each other out. It doesn't quite work like that. It's a way of trying to just translate something that doesn't make quite sense to the average person of hazard ratio. And honestly, even the data in terms of like the straight line or exactly what the hazard ratio is or the linear relationship, even those two things, I'm not particularly wrapped around the axle around. It's the relative, again, relationship and intensity of the impact. So I don't care whether it's actually -8 years. I don't care whether it's actually 0.44 hazard ratio. What stands out to me is that it's a direct relationship, meaning the more steps I take, I get a 1-for-1 improvement. And the data suggests that it's significant impact. So it's not that so for every amount of effort that I put in, I get incremental payback and it's effective. So if we go back to some of our core tenets at Barbell Logic, simple, hard, effective, it might not be hard in the same ways as lifting a barbell, but logistically, it can be a little bit challenging. We can talk a little bit about that, but it's incredibly simple and effective.
Yeah, I read one study's summary that said for every 2,000 steps, your risk of heart disease, cancer, or premature death decreases by 10%. So every 2,000 steps, like you said, is worth something. It's not just you either do 0 or you do 10,000. It's like you do a little something, you get a little something. And that seems really worthwhile and doable.
Yeah. So back to the, what started it for me, I saw that and I thought, I have also been a couple other contextual factors is that I've been dealing with some injury setbacks. My training was not quite as robust. And I was also feeling the need to add some sort of conditioning into my programming.
Yeah.
And I was looking for something that was a little more on the low intensity, steady state. I do occasionally add in some HIIT exercise from time to time, but I was really looking for something, again, on that simplicity standpoint that I could do every day. And that what I found that I think we'll talk about a little bit later from a practical standpoint, could be stacked with other habits that added value to my day. So one of the biggest problems that I had when I was really big into cycling is that it started to become very impractical to go do the thing. First off, all the equipment, all the gear and et cetera. But I really like the idea of walking being something that I could be sitting at my desk working, sun breaks through the clouds, I throw my shoes on, go. And again, going back to that linear relationship, I don't need to go for an hour. I don't need to go get, for 45 minutes to get my bang for my buck. I just need to go do something.
It's like super, super approachable. And we found that as coaches too, which is why we're talking about it today, is like at a certain point, a client wants to know, is there something else I should be doing? Or I really would like to do something for my conditioning. Or what can I do for my health? Like they've been lifting, they've been with us for 1,000 workouts. Like there's more to life than the lifts. People want to figure out how to feel good for a longer amount of their lifespan. Right. And so this is like the base thing you can do. Then there's conditioning as well. And this is one thing that adds to your value. It has other influences, like you said, like we tie this into nutrition. That's like it's something that came up for you when you were doing nutrition and kind of aesthetic related goals. And then there's I think there's just a huge mental component. So I think that's how it comes into the barbell logic life is like, we're trying to feel better for a longer.
Right. I wanted to do something that wasn't going to directly impact my training, my lifting. Like I still was prioritizing my lifting, training 3-4 times a week. And I wanted to be able to have something that I could add, again, incrementally, however much I could or wanted to on a given day without feeling like, it essentially has, as far as I can tell, zero. And if anything, it probably has a positive impact on my training because I recover better.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So that was the impetus for me. You can actually go back and look at my phone record, and it was like, I can see the day that I read the study. And it was the next day I decided April 14th, I'm going to walk 10,000 steps a day. And
how did that go for you?
Well, just this week, I officially hit, when I look back at my phone records, my step count and my watch records, an average daily step count of 10,001 steps. So I've officially done it for exactly a year. That doesn't mean I hit 10,000 steps every day. Some days more, some days less. I think I hit up to as many as like 23,000 or 24,000 on March 9th of last year. I mean, I've been as low as 2,000 or 3,000, I think, like Christmas Day or something like that. There was not a whole lot of activity. So there's been a big range, but generally speaking, what I've come to do is aim for a weekly average of 10,000. And over the last year, that's translated to a daily average over 365 days. Feels pretty good to hit that.
Congratulations. Like that took
Thank you.
Effort that you had to choose to go do that, especially when, the weather is not great or it's a busy day. And sometimes it's just hard to like tear yourself away from what you're doing to be like, okay, let me just get outside. But that 10,000, unless you're like on your feet all day for work, or I bet it's, if you're a really active parent, then I think that will happen. But when you're like us and you have a computer attached job, it does take like concerted effort.
Yeah. I went back and I've had my Apple Watch since 2018, I think is when I got it, or 2019 maybe. Yeah, that was 2019. And then I had my phone. I switched to an Apple phone about 2017. So I have records going back. When I only had my phone, the average was like 2,700 steps a day or 2,000. Wow. And this was working in a factory where I would do hourly walks through the plant. I wasn't sedentary, I would say. When I added the watch in, so I was capturing more data, it bumped up to somewhere between like 5,000 and 6,000. I think I was sort of for the year, I was averaging around 6,000. So to get to 10,000, I had to add about 40% more steps to my daily activity. in order to get up to 10,000, which is a pretty concerted effort. That's an extra 30 to 40 minutes of walking a day.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, like, 10,000 steps, it could seem like a lot or a little, depending on who you are, who's listening. But like,
Right.
How long does it take you, like time-wise and distance-wise, some realm to hit that?
Typically, what I'm seeing is that in order for me to hit 10,000, I need to hit at least 2 30-minute walks a day at a pretty moderate pace. Still zone 1 conditioning, so less than 127 beats per minute for me. 2 30-minute walks and a moderately active day. Like if I'm only sitting on the couch watching TV all day, 2 30-minute walks still isn't going to do it. I still have to get probably another 2,000 to 3,000 steps from just day-to-day activities. So like I notice, for example, when I'm grilling and I'm going to the barbecue a lot, I hit 10,000 like no problem with 2 walks and grilling, as an example.
That's cool. That's awesome.
Or if I'm cleaning the house or doing some sort of like yard work or project, 2 walks and that, I'll hit 10,000. If I'm at my desk all day, 2 walks, I probably have to do a 3rd walk, or I have to do 2 slightly longer walks. So that's something we can talk about again on like the practical aspect of things and how to manage that. But typically it works out to me needing to walk about 4 to 5 miles a day.
Mm-hmm. And what have you noticed it's done for you on a positive side since April?
Well, along with theoretically making me 8 years younger, which is pretty great. And there's also, so there's other studies as well that suggest that it increases your life expectancy. Yeah, there's this other study we include in our Beyond Lifting Challenge that this leisure time physical activity of moderate to vigorous intensity and mortality, a large pooled cohort analysis from 2012, 6 prospective cohort studies ranging from age 21 to 90, they found that adding up to as much as a 450 minutes of walking per week or brisk walking gained 4.5 years of life expectancy. So theoretically, I'm reducing my risk of death and extending my life. But I also noticed some improvements to my training, as I mentioned, which we've also have some evidence of that in the literature, because what I notice is my breathing and my heart rate in between sets gets better. So I'm able to train, I'm able to do more volume in less time with less fatigue. That's one of the biggest things that I noticed. I noticed that I am able to manage my body composition better. So when I wasn't walking consistently, I noticed that I had more variation in my weight and my waist, which I track fairly regularly. So I would have these kind of spikes of weight that fluctuated up as much as like 10, sometimes 12 pounds. And this last year, I noticed that my fluctuation was more like plus or minus 3 or 4 pounds. This is just anecdotal. I don't know why that is. Maybe it changed my eating habits, which I do think is true. You're spending more time outside being physically active. You're just naturally you don't have as much time to eat. Yeah. It doesn't feel as good to eat.
Unless you bring snacks with you.
Unless you're a trail mix hiker, you can very easily eat your calorie expenditure.
Yeah.
But I found, the 10,000 steps, again, is relatively arbitrary, similar to chasing a PR. They're numbers that I don't think that the 10,000 in particular has any particular meaning to me other than it changes my behavior, and I enjoy the behavior change. So I also noticed just stacking it with other habits has improved my mood and just overall kind of quality of life. I like doing a walk first thing in the morning and getting sun exposure. I think you've talked about that before.
Yes.
And it's on, Huberman Lab has been talking about the value of seeing sun first thing in the morning. And I just think that if I think about my morning routine when I wasn't trying to hit 10,000, where often I would just go straight to sitting down in front of my desk and drinking coffee, to now going out on a walk, getting some sun exposure, gets my blood flowing, gets my brain kind of going. I'm not looking at my phone. I'm not looking at the screen. I'm getting some activity. And then after that, and maybe getting some meditation time or just some fresh air, I just feel like my day feels better and my energy is more leveled out throughout the day.
That's really important. That seems like something that will happen and you don't notice it. You're just like, well, this is just how it is. And then when you start to feel what a good workflow feels like, or how you can handle phone calls all day and, process work differently, then you're like, oh, this
Yes.
actually feels a lot better. I didn't realize that I was feeling like this before.
Totally. And one of the downsides you could argue is time. And sometimes I will feel like, oh man, okay, I gotta go get this walk in, or it's not gonna happen. And it sometimes feels like I'm pulling myself away from work. But I would argue I've actually in some ways gotten more higher quality work done while walking.
Yeah.
Because it gets me away from the desk, it gets me outside, it gets me into a new environment. My thinking is freed up. I'll often listen to podcasts that are work related that interest me. And I think I basically wrote most of my presentation for the block party last year, coaches conference, while on walks, just kind of
That's so cool.
telling the stories over in my head and kind of practicing that. So
I've noticed that too. And I was thinking about this while I was walking the other day is like, before I walk, do you remember that game Boggle?
Oh,
where it's like, So it's, if you don't know, there's like a tray. It's like this mustard yellow tray. And I think it's like 5x5 and there are die with letters on each side. And you put a lid on, you shake it up really hard. And then you let the cubes fall and you have to make out words within the mess. And like before I go on a walk, I feel like it's just my head shaking around with all the cubes in it. And like as I'm working, more cubes get added, more cubes get added. And then when I start walking, it's like that starts to settle and they go somewhere. And then I can start reading words. But it's getting away from the screen. It's often, I'll sometimes listen to a podcast and sometimes not, because sometimes I don't want anything else coming into my brain.
Yep.
I just want to like take step after step, watch my dog walk, pick up his poop and have some really important breakthroughs that I think don't happen unless you're away from those big external inputs.
And that's one of the things that I like about going back to the exercise prescription of walking, along with it being accessible to anybody that can walk. The range of activities that you can do while walking is also extensive. You can listen to podcasts, you can listen to audiobooks, you can talk to somebody.
Yeah, you can go with your family.
You can call somebody. You could meditate. There's actually a really interesting podcast I was listening to Sam Harris on the Huberman Lab talking about how Harris has evolved his meditation more towards incorporating it with his day-to-day activity, where it's more of like a mindfulness practice than it is sitting in a dark room and with your eyes closed and trying to like silence your brain, which I've done that type of meditation too. And it has a very profound, it can lead to profound experiences, but we're busy. We're trying to do a lot of things. Often the practical and sustainable thing is the one that you can do while doing lots of other things. So I love that aspect of walking, that it doesn't require a ton of concentration unless you're going down a slippery hill right outside your, in the mountain or something like that. Or like Matt trying to climb that
his cliff
the mountain.
climbing the cliff.
Yeah.
You can vary the intensity for sure.
One of my favorite mindfulness practices you actually mentioned, I think on the podcast, of the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Oh, yes.
Which I think is just like a great mindfulness practice that I love doing when I'm out walking in the woods, because there's so many things that you can, 5 things. What is it? Sound, sight, or see, sound.
Yeah. So you list 5 things that you see. Literally anything. It could be a car, it could be your own feet, it could be the color of the sky, whatever. 4 things that you hear, 3 things that you feel. I think that one's really fun.
Yeah.
And then the last 2 are kind of interchangeable. 2 things that you smell and 1 thing that you taste. And it just makes you feel really, really present. And you can just like keep doing it over and over again when you're in a different, block or different part of the street, which is it kind of, I think that makes you feel like you're in your walk and not doing anything else.
Yeah.
It's a good thing to do when you're like still kind of fighting to get the 10,000 steps and you're just like, oh my God, I'm only at 7,000 and I still have 3,000 more to do. Then that helps me to be like, okay, I'll be fine. I'm just walking. Apparently just walk.
Yeah. It really is that simple. And, kind of following back in terms of like what benefits that I experienced that also kind of aligns with the step count and body composition with the research that we included in our Beyond Lifting Challenge that talks about how there's some evidence that inactivity causes resistance to improvements in metabolism, even after exercise. once again, here we are floating around this number of 8,500, 10,000, and jumping back to that linear reduction study, most of the benefits were somewhere around that like 6,000 to 7,000 steps. That's where you get.
That's the number I shoot for.
Yeah. So like for me, 10,000 steps, what that does for me is it builds buffer so that I can have days that aren't necessarily 10,000. That's kind of how I look at it. It's almost like managing my macros or my calories. Like I'll have high days during the week so that during the weekend I can have a little buffer. That's what I find aiming for 10,000 does. But it also appears to have this same kind of metabolism effect, ability to help you manage your body weight.
I like that. I didn't hear about that before. That's really interesting.
That one kind of surprised me because we don't talk a lot about impacts to metabolism, or walking does. People talk about you're burning calories, and I did go back and look at my log on low step days where I'm at like 2,700 steps. I'm burning, according to my watch, usually something like 400 to 500 calories. And what I found when I'm doing 10,000 is I'm burning supposedly 1,000 calories. I don't think that that's accurate. I'm not, again, hanging my hat or counting calories that I'm dependent on that 500, but it's obviously more.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely feel that benefit of giving myself a little bit more buffer or breathing room in terms of my nutrition.
Yeah, that's interesting. It sounds like you really kind of just prime yourself, like you said earlier, to be more responsive to the things that you want to do.
Prime myself to be more responsive.
You prime yourself to be more responsive to training, recovery, diet changes, and even just like kind of mental clarity.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of thinking about it. By priming myself, I would say that because I'm aiming for that goal, I find that I have to structure my day in a way that aligns my behavior with my goals. Does that make sense? Like if I don't prioritize walking early or at least frequently throughout the day, or planning a large walk later in the day, then my day in general, I notice, does not, when I get done with the day and I look back at it, it doesn't align with who I want to be. Whereas walking seems to be a great enabler for setting my whole day up to be prioritized more appropriately with my goals.
That's a nice way to put it.
As a coach, I think about step counts and walking in general, back to that exercise criteria that we talk about for barbell training, that it's safe, has a wide therapeutic window, it's comprehensive, specific and effective, and simple and efficient. Same thing applies to walking. I can give my clients a step count goal and track that easily over time, and they'll feel some version of the same benefits, improved mood, recovery, body composition, calorie expenditure, intercept recovery, and potentially less pain symptoms. I don't have those study off the top of my head, but I have seen also that walking and just activity in general reduces the experienced pain symptoms. I don't know if you've noticed that, like with your back, just kind of walking sometimes seems to like loosen it up a little bit or warm it up.
Yeah, totally. And often like pain comes from being in the same position for a long time, which is going to be like sleeping, or it's going to be, sitting at the chair. So it's kind of just a nice break of being in that same position. So, and it, changes how your spine is experiencing force, or where how your feet are on the floor, how your hips are tilted. So yeah, I think that definitely, and it's one thing that my clients who experience back pain, walking seems to be a nice relief, big time.
Yeah. So I've also got some practical tips that I'd share with the listeners, things that I've learned after a year of trying to hit 10,000 steps a day. We've talked a little bit already about habit stacking. This kind of goes back to the James Clear Atomic Habits approach that, first off, my identity shifted, that April 14th, I was like, okay, I'm a 10,000 step a day walker. That's who I am. That's what I do. And then, like I said, like we talked about, adding in the other things that you like to do, whether it's podcasts, audiobooks, go with friends, walking, meditation.
Walking
big one
to the
for
gym.
me. Yes. Find ways to walk to the store if you can, walk to the gym. I've definitely found that type of thing changes my steps dramatically without even like adding things that don't feel like I'm going for a walk into the day, significantly increase the steps. A lot of that will depend on how walkable your area is.
Yeah.
But hopefully you can find ways to do that. Big one for me, especially being in the Pacific Northwest, is to have layers to support going out in any kinds of weather. So, here it's important to have like a shell jacket, like a rain jacket, and rain pants for me was big, because that enabled me to just go grab those two things and walk out the door no matter what the weather was.
Yeah. You've recently converted me to rain gear, which where I live in California, we usually don't get rain, but we've been getting it. And it is so awesome to just have like an exoskeleton where you're just like, I'm just having a great time in my little shell of dryness.
That's right. And, you can put whatever layers you need depending on the temperature underneath and be dry. And then you get home and get right back into work.
Yeah, it's
Same
great.
with shoes. Having good waterproof shoes to get you through the puddles and stuff is important in the mud, so that you don't. What that one really is about, from the Atomic Habits perspective, is minimizing resistance to whatever the habit change is. So just making sure you don't have an excuse like it's raining to not go outside.
Yeah, feeling safe is kind of can be like a friction point. Is like, am I visible enough? Like, is it well lit enough? Am I walking in the right neighborhood? Does someone know where I am? And you can use your Apple Watch for a little flashlight. I do that. And I just got my dog a neon collar, and you can, put, wear one of those cool safety vests. There's even an app you can use where you like hold a button down until you're back home in a safe location. And if you take your finger off the button, it asks you, are you okay? And if not, within like a really short amount of time, it'll just call 911. So there's some, hopefully you're not always walking in an area where that's necessary, but it is nice to know that like you don't have to be completely isolated.
I'm usually more worried about mountain lions, owls. I've been attacked by an owl. I've seen a mountain lion in the tree on one of my trails. Yeah. But I end up having, fortunately for my biking and hiking days, these really powerful headlamp that I use. So other tips, I think splitting them up makes a big difference. Getting it to a point where you don't have to do more than 20 or 30 minutes at a time. And along with that, have multiple routes planned out. So I would say it took me about 6 months since moving into the house that I'm at now to build out a network of routes that I know pretty much how long and how far I'm going to go on about 6 different routes. And then I know fortunately I live near a big mountain with trails. I can piece together however long beautiful. I want to go. And that's really nice to be able to do just from a variety standpoint. So you don't feel like you're doing the same loop over and over again. A huge one for me, because I traveled a lot last year, was walking in airports. Now I was doing a lot of connecting flights also, which made a huge difference, because I would be flying from regional airports and I'd have, an hour or so, hour and a half between flights. Great opportunity to go get steps. Yep. So that one was huge.
Which is technically rucking, because you likely have a backpack.
Well, I typically travel with a backpack and a bag. So I was rucking. So I would ruck through the airport. Yes, very well put.
Shout out CJ.
Those are the big ones for me. The other big one I thought that the 10,000 steps helped me do was plans activities to go hiking, that were fun.
Yeah.
So having well-defined routes that you can reference, but then also do some research in your area and find some hikes in the area. You can really get to know, depending on, how close you are to nature, you can get to know there's some really beautiful spots in your neighborhood.
There might just be a huge park that you never knew about. Like check out the All Trails app, because they have hikes, but then they also just have like walking paths, and you can look at pictures and look at reviews and see how close they are to you. And if you're not feeling safe in your area, if you're not in a super walkable spot, then you might be able to do a 4-minute drive or stop on your way home or way to work or on your lunch break and figure out a way to get your steps in.
Last but not least, shameless plug for the Barbell Logic Beyond Lifting Challenge that we have going on right now. If you go to barbell-logic.com/beyond lifting, you can go sign up for the challenge that will kind of help prompt you with making some changes, including adding more steps to your day-to-day.
Totally free.
Totally free challenge. If you are a Barbell Logic client, you can talk to your coach about having them support you with metrics in the app. I find that metrics made a big difference for me. Definitely drove my behavior change and having some accountability I also have, use the exercise rings on my watch and have friends that are following along with me. So there's also that fun way to have some accountability and visibility to getting my steps in too.
Yeah, it's fun. Oh, wow. Thanks for sharing all that. I think that's really rad that you hit the 10,000 mark. You're able to
Thank you.
Tell us how it works for you. And it's neat to see you 8 years younger. Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. What is it? What's fun?
And thanks everybody for listening. Maybe if you were listening on your walk, I hope you had a nice walk. And next time, take us with you on your little walk around your neighborhood. And if you enjoyed this, we would love a review from you and maybe stars, maybe 5 of them. That'd be awesome. We'd really appreciate it. It helps more people learn about the podcast. And we hope you all have a good day. Thanks for being here, Andrew.
All right. I'm going to head out on a walk.
Oh, of course you are. Thanks, everybody.